What's good, YouTube, everybody? So it's been a minute since I've recorded a video of my trade executions, mainly because I've been so busy and I've not been able to edit the videos. I've recorded the videos, I've just not been able to edit them so that I can post. And because they're so many days before or so many days ago, I decided I'm not gonna go ahead and try to edit and post all of them, mainly because of work and just my day-to-day life. I wasn't able to post a lot for the past week or so. But this morning I did record and I have a little bit of extra time to go ahead and edit the video today and post. Um, this morning's price action was pretty rough. It was a seek and destroy type profile for the opening range, and the move actually took place in the 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock hour. I'm happy to say that I was on side with the bias or where I expected price to draw to. However, I got I got trapped offside in the open range, maybe because I entered a little bit too early. However, with all of my entries, I was actually pretty satisfied with. And if I'm supposed to comment, or if I was, I would take those trades again. There wasn't any trade that I was upset that I took because they were all on solid premise. And the only trade that I would say was a little bit outside of my comfort zone was my second trade. However, it was on solid premise, but it wasn't in line with my bias. It was just basically trading what I thought was order flow at the time. And you'll see it in the video. I speed the video up because it was about an hour long because I recorded the entire session. So the video is in times two speed, I believe. So I'm just doing a voiceover just to go over what I was thinking while I was taking the trade. So here I entered on the fair value gap that I'm highlighting right now, and that was during the opening range. I see that price was respecting the upper quadrant or the upper portion, not quadrant, I'm sorry, the upper half of the fair value gap. The bodies were staying above or closing above the upper half, which was what I wanted to see. So I was comfortable in the trade. I was indecisive in regards to where to put my stop loss. I wanted to put it below the fair value gap candle, but I realized the volatility in the market is very high and we're getting a lot of wicks. So I normally give like a little bit of extra room whenever I see this type of movement because the wicks can go very far and then the body still respect the fair value gap, and that's the reason I move my stop back below the low, just to give it a little bit of room to like gyrate, expecting that it would not take that low out. So right now I'm just waiting. I did ended up closing this trade the moment that it gave me a closure below the consequent encouragement of the fair value gap. Just because that's not necessarily what I want to see, and because of the conditions that we're in, giving me a closure below the fair value gap is just, I was no longer comfortable in the trade, and I ended up closing before it went into drawdown. So I closed that at basically a little over break even. And I was happy because then price decided to dump. And at this point, I was second guessing my bias. I was wondering if I was offside. I'm sorry. I was wondering if I was offside. And while I'm trying to stick with a bias or a narrative, I'm always also telling myself to pay attention to what the chart is showing me. And a lot of the times when I'm offside, the chart is showing me that I'm offside with order flow and I choose to ignore it. So this is why I was looking at this. At this point, I was looking at it to say, okay, this fair value gap might become an inversion fair value gap. So I'm not a big fan of taking inversion fair value gaps. So I wanted to see a respect of it by touching it, staying in the lower half of the fair value gap and getting a displacement below the low. I would have entered on either a fair value gap or I wanted to enter on that order block. The up close candle right before that down close candle that we're in. I wanted to enter on that as an order block, but it did not give me a pullback into that right away. So I didn't get an entry right away. I think it created a fair value gap. And because of the risk, I did not enter right at the low of the fair value gap just because I wanted it to tap the order block. And I was trying to frame where I think price could draw to here. And then when price began to trade back up into the order block, I decided to take my entry there. Just because we've inverted the bullish fair value gap, we've reacted up the low of the inversion fair value gap. And at this point, I felt like bearish order flow was being respected. So I was open to the fact that I was probably offside. And that's the reason I ended up taking this entry, which is the short right here. As it was digging into the order block, I took the short and I was contemplating if I should place my stop above the fair value gap or above the order block or above the tiny fair value gap that was there. But I was like, if order flow is truly bearish, it should not go above that order block. And that's the reason I kept my stop there, which I was very pleased with because it was indeed not. At this point I realized that it was not bearish order flow and we were basically in a chop because there was a lot of PDRAs that I disrespected, and at this point I was just waiting to see clarity. Now at this point I was still hoping that I was long, my long bias was right, but I needed to get an entry that I was really comfortable with. I was gonna take that fair value gap and put my stop below that low again. However, I decided to wait. I didn't want to enter right off. It just happened the fair value gap because of, again, I saw that we were in seek and destroy and it was like it was probably gonna work, probably not. So I was just patient here throughout this section and I'm going to, yeah, I was patient throughout this section. I was just waiting on confirmations to get another long entry. This was supposed to be my final trade. I normally do 2 trades. However, because I was seeing that there was manipulation, I was seeing that conditions weren't the best, but I also figured that I entered. This was the fair value gap I was referring to that it's in right now. I was gonna go along in that fair value gap, put my stop below the fair value gap candle or the low that was created. However, because I've already taken, well, I took one break even and one small loss, I was a little bit more patient. I was waiting to see order flow being respected again. So I wanted to see that fair value gap respected, and the moment that It traded above a down close candle that's that's being the moment that it traded above the moment that price trades above the opening of a down close candle that's coming out of a fair value gap. I was gonna say redirected, but I don't think the word was right. So you're gonna see that I entered the buy somewhere right here based on the fact that there was an order block there. So I entered there because the price traded above the opening of that down close candle inside the fair value gap. So I considered that an order block and I entered my long position there, stopped below the fair value gap candle. And I figured that this was it because the manipulation already happened to the downside. And I was like, all right. So I ended up closing this trade early just because I was kind of thrown off by the price action. I must admit, it had me second guessing my entries and where price was actually going. And I was like, maybe it's just gonna be a morning that's ranging and it's not gonna expand. So I was not willing to take a loss on this trade, and I was having a problem framing my risk. I wanted to put it below the order block, expecting that price should not trade back below that order block. But considering the conditions, I was like, maybe it's safer to give it room just to gyrate in the fair value gap a little bit more if it wanted to go and sweep that low, tap back into the fair value gap once more, and then displace again. I moved my stop just to facilitate that. But I closed the trade here again just because I was not entirely comfortable anymore. I realized my emotions weren't intact. I wasn't nervous or anything. I wasn't scared. I wasn't feeling anything. I was just trying to tell myself, whenever I see conditions like this, it's best to stay out of the market. And I would rather miss out on a trade and know that the conditions were not favorable than push my try to push my edge in conditions that are not favorable, and then at the end of the day I'm upset with myself for not closing the trade or trying to take more trades than I should, because at this point I was already over my 2 trade limit, and that's the reason I ended up closing this third trade. However, obviously hindsight, I wish I did not close that trade, but again, I'm not upset just because the conditions were not clear to me, and I just decided to stay on the sidelines. So I ended up coming out break even basically. I did not lose anything on the day. So I still consider that a win. And I'm proud of how I controlled my emotions and controlled my trading. And at this point, we're still inside the order block. And I was basically just observing what price was doing at this point. I was seeing if it was gonna go, if it was gonna disrespect the order block. I was not wanting to re-enter the trade. I already closed the trade and I was done for the morning session. But I was still observing price, and it was very fascinating to see that price respected that same order block that I entered on and expanded towards my target. So that just goes to say the mental capital that I waste on the previous trades prevented me from capitalizing on the move, because at this point I was taking break even trade or end a loss previous to this trade. So at this point, the confidence level isn't as high just because of how the conditions are. And I moved, I wouldn't say I acted based on emotions because I wasn't feeling any stress in the trade. It was just more so a battle between, okay, conditions aren't favorable. Should I stay in the trade just because I'm seeing what I want to see? Or should I I should I acknowledge that this isn't favorable conditions and just close the trade. So that was really what I was battling between. It was not a case where I felt nervous or felt like, oh, I'm wondering if I'm gonna lose. I'm wondering. No, it was just a case of doing what's right, following the rules that I've created. And I've created once I'm in a trade and I see that price is not expanding towards my target, as long as I've given it enough time, or if it's time of day and it's not moving towards my target, I am going to close the trade. And at this point, I was observing that price was closing in the upper half of the order block that I entered on. And I was like, it's probably still going to go towards my target because the wicks were digging down into the order block, but the bodies were closing in the upper half. And this is what I mean by I want to give it room just because the wicks will do a lot, but it will still close and respect the PD array. And this is exactly what happened here. So if I was still in the trade and they kept my stop loss below the fair value gap candle, I would have been able to capitalize on this move. However, it is a journaling opportunity, and I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm proud that I was able to see what I saw this morning in price action and that I controlled myself. So price did end up respecting this order block and hitting target. So those are my executions today. Thank you guys for watching. I will try to post or try to keep consistent with posting these videos and keeping you guys updated. Until next time, I hope you guys had a great day today trading. I hope you guys stayed safe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.